The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage at exactly 11:47 p.m. I'd been elbow-deep in the engine bay of a 1970 GTO for the past 3 hours, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of pistons and carburetors, when the sound of raised voices drifted through my open workshop window. "I'm not canceling girls' night just because your grandmother's in the hospital, Jessica. She'll be fine." My wife Stella's voice carried that particular brand of ice-cold irritation I'd grown to know so well over our 15 years of marriage. "Mom, that's horrible. Dad's been there every day this week. You haven't even visited once." My daughter's voice cracked with teenage indignation. "Your father enjoys playing the martyr. It's his favorite hobby besides that ridiculous garage. Evan would never waste time on such dramatics." I froze. Evan Bishop, Stella's so-called business partner at the marketing firm downtown. The name had been popping up in conversations more frequently over the past few months, always accompanied by that dreamy tone women get when they're talking about someone who makes their pulse quicken. "At least Evan understands what success looks like," Jessica shot back. "Dad's just sad. Like seriously embarrassing sad." The wrench in my hand suddenly felt heavy as a sledgehammer. I set it down carefully on my workbench, wiping my hands on an old shop rag while their conversation continued to drift through the humid August night air. "Don't be cruel, sweetheart. Your father has his qualities. He's just not equipped for the kind of life we deserve." Stella's voice had taken on that patronizing tone she used when explaining why we couldn't afford the vacation house in the Hamptons, or why my suggestions for date nights were always somehow inadequate. I walked to the window and peered through the gap in the curtains. There they were, in our kitchen, my wife and daughter, bonding over what a disappointment Jake Mallory had turned out to be. Stella looked immaculate, even at midnight. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, her silk pajamas probably costing more than most people's monthly car payments. Jessica, 19, and home from Ohio State for the summer, was a younger version of her mother, beautiful, entitled, and increasingly convinced that her old man was nothing more than a source of embarrassment and ATM withdrawals. "I just don't understand why you stay with him," Jessica said, scrolling through her phone while she talked. "My friends' parents are getting divorced left and right. At least their moms end up with someone who actually matters." Stella laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Marriage is complicated, honey. Besides, your father serves his purpose. He's reliable, predictable, and he doesn't ask too many questions." Doesn't ask too many questions. The phrase hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. Is that really what I'd become? The reliable fool who paid the bills and kept his mouth shut while his wife and daughter lived their lives around him instead of with him? I backed away from the window and returned to the GTO, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold the tools properly. My mother was dying in Riverside General Hospital, had been fighting pancreatic cancer for 6 months, and my wife couldn't be bothered to visit because it might interfere with her social calendar. My daughter, who had worked 60-hour weeks to put through college, thought I was an embarrassment, and apparently I was too stupid to ask the right questions. The house went quiet around midnight. I heard Stella's heels clicking up the stairs, heard Jessica's door slam, heard the familiar sounds of my family settling in for the night without giving me another thought. I should have gone inside, should have confronted them, should have demanded some basic human decency. Instead, I did what I always did. I kept working on the car and told myself things would look better in the morning. They didn't. The next morning started like every other morning in the Mallory household. I made coffee for 3, scrambled eggs that only I would eat, and listened to Stella complain about her schedule while Jessica ignored us both in favor of her phone. "I'll be late tonight," Stella announced, not looking up from her tablet. "Client dinner with the Morrison account. Evan thinks we can close the deal if we really wine and dine them." "Of course he does," I muttered into my coffee mug. "What was that?" "Nothing. Hope it goes well." Jessica snorted. "Dad, you're so transparent. Just because you're jealous of successful people doesn't mean you have to be passive-aggressive about it." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become so cruel? When had I become someone worth being cruel to? "I'm going to see Grandma this morning," I said. "Either of you want to come?" "Can't." "Yoga class with Madison," Jessica said without looking up. "I have that conference call with the Denver office," Stella added. "Right. Of course they did." I finished my coffee in silence and headed for the door. As I reached for my keys, I heard Stella's phone buzz on the kitchen counter. She'd left it behind in her rush to get ready. I should have ignored it. Should have grabbed my keys and walked out the door like the reliable, predictable husband who doesn't ask too many questions. But I didn't. The phone was unlocked, the message preview visible on the screen. It was from Evan Bishop. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Same time tonight? My hands went numb. I sank into the kitchen chair and stared at the screen, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something that didn't mean what they obviously meant, but they didn't change. I opened the message thread with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. What I found there destroyed 15 years of marriage in the space of 30 seconds. Miss you already. Room 247 at the Edgewater Inn was perfect. You're incredible. Dave never made me feel like this. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Think Jessica suspects? She keeps asking about our business meetings. She's on our side. Told her you deserve better than a grease monkey. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the kitchen table. Jessica knew. My own daughter knew about the affair and was actively helping to cover it up. They weren't just betraying me. They were laughing about it. I scrolled further back, my stomach churning with each new revelation. Photos, explicit messages, hotel receipts forwarded from Stella's email, a selfie of my wife and her lover at what looked like a cheap roadside motel, both of them grinning like teenagers who'd just gotten away with something. The timestamp on the oldest message was from 3 months ago. 3 months of lies. 3 months of client dinners and girls' nights and conference calls. 3 months of me being the reliable fool who didn't ask questions. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Stella was coming back down, probably looking for her phone. I closed the messages and set the device back where I'd found it, then grabbed my keys and walked out the door before she could see my face. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. My mother was sleeping when I arrived, her face gray and sunken against the white pillows. She looked so small, so fragile. The woman who'd raised me single-handedly after my father died, who'd worked double shifts at the diner to keep food on the table, who'd been so proud when I'd finally saved enough money to open my own garage. "Hey, Mom," I whispered, taking her hand. She opened her eyes and smiled. "Jake, you look terrible." "Thanks. You really know how to make a guy feel special." She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "Where's Stella? And Jessica?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't explain that her daughter-in-law was too busy screwing around to visit, that her granddaughter thought visiting the dying was beneath her social status. "They'll be by later," I lied. Stella had a work thing. Mom nodded, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what kind of people they were. Had probably known long before I was willing to admit it to myself. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the morning talk shows on the tiny hospital television. During a commercial break, she turned to me with that look mothers get when they're about to say something you don't want to hear. "Jake, honey, you know you deserve better than this, right?" "Mom, I'm dying, so I get to say whatever I want." "That wife of yours is poison, and she's turning your daughter against you. A man can only take so much before he has to stand up for himself." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, wanted to defend my family, wanted to pretend everything was fine. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just held her hand and let her be right. When visiting hours ended, I drove back home with a head full of questions and a heart full of rage. The house was empty. Stella at her conference call, Jessica at her yoga class. I walked through the rooms we'd shared for over a decade, seeing them with new eyes. Everything was a lie. The family photos on the mantle, the wedding ring on my finger, the life I thought we'd built together. All of it was just an elaborate performance for my benefit, and apparently, I'd been the only one who didn't know it was an act. I went back out to the garage and picked up my wrench. The GTO was still waiting, patient and honest in a way that people weren't. At least cars didn't lie to you. When something was broken, you could see it, fix it, or replace it. Too bad marriages weren't that simple. By the time Stella came home that night, reeking of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine, I'd made a decision. If my wife and daughter wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. If they thought I was too stupid to figure out what was happening under my own roof, I'd show them exactly how wrong they were. But I wouldn't be stupid about it. I wouldn't scream or throw punches or do any of the things that would let them paint me as the crazy, jealous husband. I'd be smart. I'd be patient, and I'd be absolutely ruthless.
How was the client dinner?
I asked when she slipped into bed beside me, her hair still damp from what was obviously a very thorough shower. Exhausting. But I think we got the deal. She turned away from me, pulling the covers up to her chin. I'm beat. Good night. Good night, honey. Sweet dreams. She was snoring within minutes, the sleep of someone with a clear conscience, or no conscience at all. I lay awake until I was certain she was deep under, then carefully slipped out of bed and made my way downstairs. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. This time, I was ready. I'd spent the afternoon researching, learning about cloud backups and message recovery, about the digital trails that cheating spouses always think they've covered. Stella was smart, but she wasn't tech smart. She was the kind of person who used the same password for everything and never bothered to check her privacy settings. It took me less than an hour to access her email, her photo backup, her message history across 3 different apps. What I found there was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had been going on for 6 months, not 3. They'd been meeting at hotels, at his apartment, even in her office after hours. She'd been lying about business trips, staying local while telling me she was in Cleveland or Columbus. There were videos. There were plans for a weekend getaway to Chicago. There was even discussion about what would happen when Jake finally figures it out. He won't, Stella had written. He's too comfortable being a victim. It's easier for him to pretend everything's fine than deal with reality. What if he does? Evan had replied. Then I'll take half of everything and move on. The garage is worth decent money, and there's the house. I've been married to him long enough to deserve a good settlement. The garage. My garage. The business I'd built from nothing, working 18-hour days and sleeping on a cot in the office for the first 2 years until I could afford to pay myself a real salary. She was already planning to take it away from me. I screenshot everything, backed it all up to a secure email account I created just for this purpose, then carefully returned her phone to its charger. By the time I went back upstairs, I had enough evidence to destroy her in any divorce court in Ohio. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. The next evening, Stella announced another girls' night with her friend Marla. She'd be out late, probably wouldn't be home until after midnight. Jessica was conveniently spending the night at her friend Madison's house. Don't wait up, Stella said, kissing my cheek with lips that had been on another man just hours before. I won't. Have fun. I waited exactly 30 minutes after she left, then got in my truck and drove to the Edgewater Inn. It was a seedy little place on the outskirts of town, the kind of motel that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions. Perfect for a respectable marketing executive who needed to keep her extracurricular activities discreet. Stella's BMW was parked in front of room 247, right next to Evan's pretentious silver Mercedes. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the closed curtains, imagining what was happening behind them. Part of me wanted to kick down the door, to confront them in the act, to make them face what they were doing. But that would be emotional. That would be stupid. That would be exactly what they expected from the reliable, predictable husband who didn't ask questions. Instead, I got out of my truck and walked calmly to Evan's Mercedes. I'd brought my tools. The key job was quick and professional. Long, deep scratches along both sides of the car that would cost thousands to repair properly. The tire took longer. I wanted to make sure it was completely flat, but not obviously slashed. A careful puncture with an awl, right in the sidewall where it would look like normal wear and tear. For the finishing touch, I left a box of condoms on his windshield with a note written in block letters. Hope you last longer than these will. I was back in my truck and pulling out of the parking lot when I noticed the security camera mounted on the motel office. Its red recording light blinked steadily as I drove past, and I realized I might have been too clever for my own good. But it was too late to worry about that now. The game had started, and I intended to win. The fallout from the Mercedes incident was everything I'd hoped for and more. Stella came home the next morning in a rage, her girls' night having ended abruptly when Evan discovered his vandalized car. Can you believe someone would do that? She fumed, pacing around our kitchen while I made coffee and tried to look appropriately sympathetic. Poor Evan is devastated. That car was his pride and joy. That's terrible, I said, handing her a mug. Did he call the police? Of course he did, but what can they do? Probably just some random vandal. The motel manager said their security cameras haven't worked in months. I nodded gravely while internally celebrating. The camera had been a bluff, just a dummy unit meant to deter exactly the kind of activity I'd been engaging in. Sometimes being underestimated worked in your favor. I'm sure his insurance will cover it, I said. That's not the point, Jake. It's the violation of it. Someone targeting him specifically. She paused, studying my face. You didn't happen to go out last night, did you? Me? No, I was here all evening. Fell asleep watching the game around 10:30. Why? No reason. Just wondering. But I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was smart enough to be suspicious, just not smart enough to be careful. Over the next few days, I noticed her watching me more closely, checking up on my whereabouts, asking casual questions about my evening activities. It was almost insulting how obvious she was being. Meanwhile, I was conducting my own investigation. I started following them, learning their patterns, documenting their meetings. Evan Bishop turned out to be everything I'd expected. A trust fund baby who'd never worked a real day in his life, coasting on family connections and his ability to schmooze clients over expensive dinners. He lived in a downtown condo that probably cost more than most people made in 5 years, drove cars that cost more than my house, and had the kind of soft, manicured hands that had never held anything heavier than a wine glass. He was also a coward. I learned this the following Tuesday, when I arranged to bump into him at the parking garage downtown. I'd been tracking his schedule for a week, knew he always left the office at exactly 5:30 p.m., and always parked on the 3rd level in the same general area. Evan Bishop, I said, approaching him as he unlocked his replacement car, another Mercedes, this one black instead of silver. He turned, and I saw the exact moment he recognized me. His face went pale, and his hand tightened on his car keys like they might protect him. "You're Jake Mallory," he said, "Stella's husband." "That's right. I was hoping we could have a little chat. I don't think that's appropriate. If you'll excuse me, I need to get going." He tried to step around me, but I moved to block his path. Not aggressively, just enough to make it clear the conversation wasn't over. "See, here's the thing, Evan. I know about you and my wife. I know about the hotels, the lies, the whole sordid little affair. And I'm trying to figure out what kind of man sleeps with another man's wife while that man's mother is dying in the hospital." His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd recovered from Stella's cloud backup. His face went from pale to green. "Nice tattoo, by the way. Very distinctive. I'm sure your boss at the firm would find it interesting, seeing as how you're supposed to be maintaining professional boundaries with your business partners. You can't. That's private. That's between consenting adults. You're right. It is private, just like the conversation we're having right now." I stepped closer, close enough that he had to crane his neck to look up at me. I had 6 inches and 50 pounds on him, all of it earned through years of manual labor. "Here's what's going to happen, Evan. You're going to end this thing with my wife. You're going to transfer to a different account at work, and you're going to disappear from our lives completely." "And if I don't?" I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Then everyone in this town gets to see exactly what kind of man you really are. Your boss, your clients, your family, your friends, everyone." I reached into my tool belt and pulled out a wrench, hefting it casually in my hand. "Whoops," I said, and let it slip from my fingers. The wrench hit the concrete floor with a loud clang, bouncing once before rolling to rest against Evan's expensive Italian shoes. He jumped back like it was a live snake. "Clumsy of me," I said, bending to pick it up. "Good thing it didn't land on your foot. These things are heavier than they look. Could do some real damage if they hit the wrong spot." When I straightened up, Evan was pressed against his car door, his face shiny with sweat despite the cool garage air. "You're threatening me," he whispered. "Am I? I thought I was just having a friendly conversation with my wife's business partner. You know, getting to know the people she works with." I slipped the wrench back into my belt. "But I can see you're busy, so I'll let you get going. Nice talking with you, Evan. I'm sure we'll see each other again soon." I walked away without looking back, but I could hear him fumbling with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice before managing to get his car door open. By the time I reached the stairwell, he was peeling out of the garage like his hair was on fire. It was a good start, but it was only the beginning. The confrontation in the parking garage had exactly the effect I'd hoped for. Within days, I could see the cracks forming in Stella and Evan's perfect little affair. She came home increasingly frustrated, complaining that Evan was acting weird and pulling back from the Morrison account for no reason. Maybe he's just stressed, I suggested over dinner. Business can be tough. He's being a coward, Jessica chimed in, not looking up from her phone. Madison's mom says all men get scared when things get serious. Interesting. So Jessica was discussing her mother's love life with her friends now. That was a detail worth remembering. What would you know about serious relationships? Stella snapped at our daughter. You've never been with anyone longer than 3 weeks. At least I don't have to sneak around like some desperate housewife, Jessica shot back. The tension between them was palpable, and I found myself enjoying it more than I should have. Let them turn on each other. Let them feel what it was like when the people you trusted most became your enemies. But I wasn't content to just watch their relationship crumble. I wanted to accelerate the process. The key was Marla Henderson, Stella's best friend and alleged partner in crime for all those girls' nights. Marla was divorced, bitter, and always eager to live vicariously through other people's drama. She'd been covering for Stella's affair, providing alibis and moral support, probably getting a thrill out of being part of something forbidden. Marla worked as a real estate agent, which meant her reputation was everything. One whisper of impropriety could destroy her business overnight. It also meant she was always networking, always trying to make connections, always vulnerable to the right kind of social pressure. I started small, a few casual conversations with mutual acquaintances, just enough to plant seeds of doubt. Saw Marla at the Edgewater Inn the other day. Weird place for a real estate showing, but maybe she's expanding her territory. Marla's been looking tired lately. Hope she's not burning the candle at both ends. Did you know Marla's been spending a lot of time with that Bishop guy from downtown? The one with the fancy cars. Small-town gossip networks are more efficient than the internet. Within a week, the rumors were everywhere, growing and mutating with each retelling. Marla was having an affair with a married client. Marla was laundering money through fake real estate deals. Marla was running some kind of escort service out of cheap motels. None of it was true, but truth was beside the point. The damage was in the telling, not the facts. The first crack appeared when Marla's ex-husband called her, demanding to know why people were asking him about her new business ventures. The second crack came when her biggest client pulled out of a deal, citing concerns about professional conduct. The third crack was when her own daughter called, crying, because kids at school were making jokes about her mother. By the time Marla figured out where the rumors were coming from, she was already furious at Stella for dragging her into the mess. "This is your fault," she hissed during a phone call I conveniently overheard while Stella was in the shower. "I never should have covered for you. Now my whole life is falling apart because you couldn't keep your legs closed. That's not fair, Marla. I never asked you to. You asked me to lie for you. You asked me to be your alibi. And now everyone in town thinks I'm some kind of whore because of your affair. Keep your voice down. Jake might hear you." Good. Maybe it's time he knew what kind of woman he married. The line went dead, and I smiled as I heard Stella's phone hit the bathroom counter. Another alliance broken. Another support system destroyed. Stella was running out of friends. Running out of places to hide. Running out of people willing to help her maintain the lie. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The real masterstroke came 2 weeks later, at the annual Edgewater Community Block Party. It was one of those mandatory social events that everyone attended, the kind of gathering where reputations were made and destroyed over potato salad and gossip. Stella had been dreading it all week, knowing that the rumors about Marla had created a cloud of suspicion around their entire friend group. But she couldn't skip it without looking guilty, and she couldn't bring Evan without confirming everyone's suspicions. So she went alone, putting on her brightest smile and her most expensive dress, ready to charm her way through the whispers and sideways glances. I went too, of course. The loyal husband, supportive and oblivious, helping to serve drinks and make small talk with the neighbors. Just another face in the crowd, invisible and harmless. Until it was time for the traditional toast. Every year, someone from the neighborhood association would make a speech about community values and shared bonds. Then, everyone would raise their glasses in celebration of another year of suburban harmony. This year, I volunteered to do the honors. Friends, neighbors, Fellow residents of this beautiful community, I began, holding up my beer bottle while everyone gathered around with their drinks. We're here tonight to celebrate the bonds that tie us together, the trust that makes us strong, the honesty that defines our relationships. Stella was standing near the front of the crowd, her smile frozen in place, as she sensed something wrong in my tone. Of course, not all bonds are created equal, I continued. Some are forged in love and mutual respect. Others are built on lies, deception, and betrayal. Some people honor their commitments, while others treat them like suggestions to be ignored when something more exciting comes along. The crowd was getting uncomfortable now, sensing the shift from celebration to something darker. Stella's face had gone pale, and I could see her looking around for an escape route. But that's what makes community so important, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet gathering. When someone shows you who they really are, when they reveal their true character, the community is there to witness it, to remember it, to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person they're dealing with. I raised my bottle higher. So here's to truth, my friends. Here's to seeing people clearly, without the masks they wear or the lies they tell. Here's to knowing exactly where you stand with the people in your life. I took a long drink while the crowd stood in awkward silence, then set my bottle down and walked away, leaving Stella to face the stares and whispers alone. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And everyone there would remember it, would wonder what I meant, would start asking questions that Stella wouldn't want to answer. The real fireworks were still to come. The block party toast had been a warning shot, and Stella knew it. Over the next few days, she tried everything she could think of to regain control of the situation. She attempted to reconcile with Marla, but that bridge was thoroughly burned. She tried to convince Evan to be more public about their business relationship, but he was too scared of another parking garage encounter to risk it. She even tried to talk to me directly, testing the waters to see how much I actually knew. People have been acting strange around me lately, she said one evening while we were watching television. At the block party, after your toast, everyone seemed so uncomfortable. Did they? I didn't notice. Jake, are you happy? In our marriage, I mean. Are you happy with how things are between us? It was the first time in months she'd asked me a direct question about our relationship. The first time she'd seemed to care about my feelings at all. Under different circumstances, it might have been touching. Why do you ask? I feel like we've been distant lately, like there's something you're not telling me. I turned to look at her, this woman I'd loved for 15 years, this stranger who'd been lying to my face for 6 months. She looked genuinely concerned, genuinely worried about our marriage. It was almost convincing. Is there something you're not telling me? I asked. For just a moment, I thought she might confess. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of options, the consideration of whether honesty might be her best strategy. But then the moment passed, and she gave me that bright, empty smile I'd grown to hate. Of course not. I just want us to be happy, that's all. We are happy, I lied. Everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine, and we both knew it. The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. Jessica was spending more and more time away, crashing at friends' houses or staying late at her summer job at the mall. Stella was working longer hours, though I suspected that had more to do with avoiding me than with any pressing business needs. As for me, I was planning the end game. It started with Evan's new car. The black Mercedes had been a mistake on his part. Too flashy, too recognizable, too tempting a target. I'd been watching his patterns for weeks, learning his schedule, waiting for the perfect opportunity. It came on a Thursday night, when he was working late at the office, his car parked alone in the underground garage. This time, I didn't settle for cosmetic damage. This time, I went for the engine. Sugar in the gas tank is a myth. It doesn't actually damage anything, but there are plenty of other substances that can turn a luxury sedan into an expensive paperweight. I'd done my research, consulted with a few less than ethical mechanics I'd met over the years, learned exactly what would cause maximum damage while looking like mechanical failure. By the time I was finished, Evan's Mercedes would need a complete engine rebuild. The repair costs would exceed the car's value, and his insurance would fight the claim for months. More importantly, he'd be stranded, dependent on others for transportation, vulnerable in all the ways that mattered to a man like him. But the car was just the appetizer. The main course was his career. I'd been documenting everything. The affair, the lies, the professional misconduct. Evan was sleeping with a business partner, compromising his judgment, creating conflicts of interest that violated his company's ethics policies. All I needed was the right person to share that information with. His boss, Richard Crane, was old-school corporate, the kind of man who believed in professional boundaries and moral conduct, who'd built his reputation on running a clean, ethical firm. He wouldn't tolerate the kind of behavior Evan had been engaging in, especially not when it threatened the company's reputation. The anonymous email I sent him was brief and to the point. Thought you should know that Evan Bishop is having an affair with Stella Mallory, his, quote, business partner on the Morrison account. Attached are photos and messages that document their relationship. This seems like the kind of thing that could create liability issues for the firm. I sent it on a Friday afternoon and waited for the fallout. It came faster than I'd expected. By Monday morning, Evan had been removed from the Morrison account and transferred to a different department. By Wednesday, he had been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. By Friday, he was cleaning out his desk. The official reason was restructuring, but in a town like Edgewater, everyone knew what that meant. Evan Bishop had screwed up somehow, and Richard Crane had cut him loose to protect the company. Stella was devastated. She came home that Friday night in tears, her perfect world finally starting to crumble around her. "They fired Evan," she sobbed into her wine glass. "Just like that, after everything he's done for the company. It's not fair." "That's terrible," I said, not bothering to hide my satisfaction. "What happened?" "Richard won't say. Just some nonsense about inappropriate conduct and professional boundaries. It's ridiculous. Evan never did anything wrong. I'm sure he'll land on his feet. Guys like Evan always do." She looked at me sharply, hearing something in my tone that didn't match my words. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that he seems like a resourceful guy. You don't even know him." "You're right. I don't know him at all. Just like I apparently don't know you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Stella's tears dried up, replaced by something harder, more calculating. "What exactly are you trying to say, Jake?" This was it. The moment of truth. The point of no return. I could still back down, still pretend I didn't know what I knew, still play the role of the oblivious husband who didn't ask questions. But I was done pretending. "I'm saying I know about the affair, Stella. I know about the hotels, the lies, the whole sordid mess. I know our daughter helped you cover it up. I know Marla provided your alibis. I know everything." Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, and finally, cold calculation. When she spoke, her voice was steady and controlled. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "What do you want?" "I want my wife back. I want my daughter to respect me. I want my family to stop treating me like I'm invisible." I stood up, looking down at her. "But mostly, I want you to understand that actions have consequences. That you can't just take whatever you want without paying for it. And if I don't, if I decide I want a divorce instead," I smiled, the same cold smile I'd given Evan in the parking garage, "then you'll find out exactly how much evidence I've collected, and exactly how creative I can be when someone tries to take what's mine." She stared at me for a long moment, seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time in our marriage. Not the reliable, predictable husband, but the man who'd built a business from nothing, who'd survived in a world where weakness meant failure, who'd been pushed as far as he was willing to go. "You've changed," she said finally. "No," I replied. "I just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not." The confrontation with Stella should have been the end of it. She knew I knew. I knew she knew I knew. And we could have found some way to move forward from there. Counseling, divorce, some kind of arrangement that let us both maintain our dignity. But Stella wasn't ready to surrender. She was a fighter, always had been. And she wasn't going to let me destroy her life without putting up a battle. The counterattack came 3 days later, when I arrived home from the hospital to find Jessica waiting for me in the driveway, her face red with rage. "How could you do this to Mom?" she screamed before I'd even gotten out of my truck. "How could you be so cruel and vindictive? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I know you got Evan fired. I know you've been spreading rumors about Mom and Marla. I know you've been stalking them, threatening them, trying to destroy their lives." I walked past her toward the house, but she followed, still shouting. "Mom told me everything. How you've been acting crazy, how you've been making threats, how you vandalized Evan's car. She's scared of you, Dad." "Her own husband!" I stopped and turned to face my daughter, this 19-year-old woman who looked so much like her mother, but had inherited all of her worst qualities. Your mother is scared of me? Yes, and she should be. You're acting like a psychopath. I'm acting like a man who's tired of being lied to by his own family. She never lied to you. She's been having an affair for 6 months, Jessica. She's been meeting another man in cheap motels while my mother was dying in the hospital. And you helped her cover it up. Jessica's righteous anger faltered for just a moment, but she rallied quickly. So what? So what if she found someone who actually cares about her? You've been a terrible husband for years. You ignore her, you embarrass her. You never try to be anything more than you are. And what am I exactly? You're nobody. You're a grease monkey who thinks he deserves better than he is. Mom could have married anyone, could have had any life she wanted, and she settled for you. The least you could do is be grateful. The words hit like physical blows, each one designed to cut deep, to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. This was what they really thought of me. Not just Stella, but my own daughter. I was the embarrassment they tolerated, the paycheck they depended on, the obstacle standing between them and the life they felt they deserved. You're right, I said quietly. I am nobody. I'm just a grease monkey who works 60 hours a week to pay for your college and your mother's lifestyle. I'm just the guy who sits in a hospital room every day holding his dying mother's hand, while his family is too busy to visit. I'm just the husband who's been faithful and loyal and stupid enough to believe that meant something. Dad, but you know what, Jessica? Being nobody has its advantages. Nobody expects anything from you. Nobody watches you too closely. Nobody thinks you're smart enough to figure things out, or strong enough to fight back. I stepped closer to her, and for the first time in the conversation, she looked uncertain. Your mother made a mistake. She underestimated nobody, and now she's going to find out what happens when nobody decides he's had enough. I walked into the house, leaving Jessica standing in the driveway. Stella was waiting for me in the kitchen, her face pale but determined. We need to talk, she said. I think we've said everything we need to say. No, we haven't. This has gone far enough, Jake. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But what you're doing, the stalking, the threats, the sabotage, it has to stop. Or what? Or I'll call the police. I'll tell them you've been threatening me and Evan, that you vandalized his car, that you're becoming dangerous. I have witnesses, Jake. Marla heard you threaten me at the block party. Jessica saw you following us. Evan will testify about the parking garage. It was a good bluff, but that's all it was. She had no proof of anything, just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. And more importantly, she was forgetting that I had something she didn't. Go ahead, I said. Call them. I'd love to explain to Officer Martinez why I was following my wife. I'd love to show him the photos and messages I found on your phone. I'd love to have him interview our neighbors about your late-night girls' nights and your new business partner. Her confidence wavered. You can't use those. They were obtained illegally. This isn't a courtroom, Stella. This is a small town where reputation matters more than technicalities. Do you really want everyone to see exactly what kind of woman you are? We stared at each other across the kitchen table. Two people who'd once loved each other, now locked in a battle that only one of us could win. What do you want? She asked, finally. I want you to end it. Completely. No more contact with Evan. No more lies. No more affairs. I want you to go to counseling with me and try to fix what's broken between us. I want our daughter to show me some basic respect, and I want all of us to start acting like a family again. And if I don't, then I'll destroy you. Not just the affair, everything. Your job, your reputation, your relationship with Jessica. I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly who you really are. She was quiet for a long time, thinking it over, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. Okay, you win. I'll end it with Evan. We'll try counseling. We'll work on things. But I could see the lie in her eyes, could hear the false note in her voice. She was telling me what I wanted to hear, buying time to plan her next move. She thought she could outlast me, outmaneuver me, find some way to turn the situation to her advantage. She was wrong. Stella's promise to end the affair lasted exactly 1 week. I know because I was still watching, still documenting, still preparing for the war I knew was coming. The meeting took place at Marla's lake house. 30 miles outside of town. It was supposed to be a girls' weekend. Stella, Jessica, Marla, and a few other women from their social circle, getting away from their husbands and responsibilities for a couple of days of wine and gossip. Except Evan was there too. I'd followed them at a distance, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to see Evan's rental car. He'd been forced to rent after his Mercedes became a very expensive lawn ornament, parked behind the lake house, along with all the others. This was it, the final insult, the ultimate betrayal. Not only was Stella continuing the affair, she was flaunting it in front of our daughter and her friends. She was turning the whole thing into some kind of romantic adventure, with herself as the heroine and me as the villain, trying to keep true love apart. I parked my truck a quarter-mile away and walked through the woods to the house. It was a beautiful evening, warm and clear, with the lake reflecting the setting sun like a mirror. Under different circumstances, it would have been peaceful, but I wasn't there for peace. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, with laughter and music drifting across the water. Through the large windows, I could see them all gathered in the main room. Stella and Evan sitting close together on the couch, Jessica taking selfies with her phone, Marla playing hostess, the other women drinking wine and pretending not to notice. The obvious affair happening right in front of them. They looked so happy, so carefree, so completely unconcerned about the damage they were causing. It was like watching a party being thrown to celebrate the destruction of my life. I'd brought my tools, of course, and something else, a small device I'd purchased online, designed to interfere with cell phone signals within a limited range. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, just a way to ensure our conversation wouldn't be interrupted by calls for help. I activated the signal jammer and approached the house. The front door was unlocked. Why wouldn't it be? They were miles from anywhere, surrounded by friends, safe in their little bubble of privilege and entitlement. They never expected the nobody husband to track them down, to confront them in their sanctuary. I walked in without knocking. The conversation stopped immediately. 7 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to fear to anger. Stella went pale. Jessica's phone slipped from her hand, and Evan actually tried to hide behind the couch cushions. "Jake!" Stella stood up quickly, smoothing down her dress. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said, closing the door behind me. "Thought I'd stop by and see how the girls' weekend was going." "You need to leave," Marla said, finding her voice. "This is private property, and you're not welcome here." "Actually, I think I'll stay. I've got some things to say, and I want everyone to hear them." I walked into the center of the room, taking my time, letting them all get a good look at me. I wasn't the same man they'd been dismissing and ignoring for months. I was something harder now. Something dangerous. "See, I've been doing some thinking," I continued. "About marriage, about family, about trust. About what happens when people take advantage of someone's good nature for so long that they forget he has any other kind." "Jake, please," Stella said. "Let's talk about this at home. Privately." "Privately? Like the way you've been talking to Evan privately for the past 6 months? Like the way you and Jessica have been talking about me privately, deciding that I'm too pathetic to deserve the truth?" Jessica stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. Just go home." Am I embarrassing myself? Or am I finally standing up for myself? I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen, because I've got about 6 months worth of text messages, photos, and videos that tell a very interesting story. Should I share them with everyone here, or would you prefer I post them online where the whole town can see them? The room went dead silent. Even the music seemed to stop. "That's illegal," Evan whispered from behind the couch. "Is it?" I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing illegal about sharing photos that were voluntarily taken and sent, especially when they document adultery, which is still grounds for divorce in Ohio. I scrolled through the phone, pretending to look for something specific. Oh, here's a good one. Stella and Evan at the Edgewater Inn, room 247. Very artistic composition. And here's one of the text conversations where they discuss how stupid I am, how easy it is to fool me, how they're going to take half of everything I own when they finally decide to stop pretending. Stella sank back down onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. The other women were staring at her like they'd never seen her before, which was probably true. They'd thought they were covering for a romantic affair, not helping to destroy a marriage and steal a man's life savings. But that's not even the best part, I continued. The best part is finding out that my own daughter has been helping, taking pictures, providing alibis, making sure dear old dad stays in the dark while mommy ruins his life. Jessica started. You never what? Never called me pathetic? Never told your friends I was an embarrassment? Never helped your mother cover up her affair while my mother was dying in the hospital? Tears were running down Jessica's face now, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choice, picked her side, decided that I was the enemy. Now she got to live with the consequences. Here's what's going to happen, I said, addressing the room. Stella is going to come home with me. She's going to end this affair permanently. She's going to quit her job and find something that doesn't require her to work with her lover. And she's going to spend the rest of our marriage making up for what she's done. And if she doesn't? Marla asked. I smiled, the cold smile that had become my signature expression. Then everyone in Edgewater gets to see exactly what kind of people they really are. Every photo, every message, every dirty detail. I'll make sure it's all public record in the divorce proceedings. I'll make sure their employers see it, their families see it, their friends see it. I'll make sure they never live it down. Evan finally found his courage, standing up from behind the couch with his face red and his hands shaking. You can't do this. You can't threaten us like this. Can't I? I stepped toward him, and he immediately backed away. What are you going to do to stop me, Evan? Call the police? Go ahead. I'd love to explain to them why I'm here, why I'm angry, what you've been doing with my wife. This is insane, one of the other women whispered. No, I said. This is justice. This is what happens when you push someone too far, take too much, assume they'll never fight back. I looked directly at Stella. You wanted to see what I was really capable of? Congratulations. Now you know. The confrontation continued for another hour, with tears, accusations, and threats flying back and forth. In the end, Stella agreed to come home with me. Jessica promised to show me more respect, and Evan slunk away, like the coward he'd always been. But I knew it wasn't over. People like Stella don't surrender easily, and people like Evan don't forget humiliation. They'd regroup, find new allies, come up with a different plan. I was ready for them. The final battle came, as I'd expected, at the most public venue possible, the annual Edgewater Community Festival. It was the biggest social event of the year, with the entire town gathering in Riverside Park for food, music, and the kind of forced togetherness that small communities specialize in. Stella had been planning her counterattack for weeks, and I had to admire her strategy. She couldn't fight me privately anymore. I had too much evidence, too much leverage. But publicly, she could still play the victim. Still paint me as the unstable, controlling husband who'd driven her into another man's arms. She'd been laying the groundwork carefully, spreading her own version of events through the gossip network. Jake Mallory was having some kind of breakdown. Jake Mallory had been making threats, stalking people, vandalizing property. Jake Mallory was dangerous, unpredictable, possibly violent. It was a good strategy. It might have even worked, if I hadn't been 3 steps ahead of her the entire time. The festival was in full swing when I arrived, with half the town already gathered around the various booths and stages. I could see Stella holding court near the main pavilion, surrounded by her remaining friends, playing the role of the brave woman standing up to her abusive husband. Jessica was there too, along with several of her college friends who'd driven down for the festival. They were all taking photos and videos, documenting everything for social media, turning my family's destruction into content for their online followers. Even Evan was there, trying to blend into the crowd, but standing out like a sore thumb in his expensive clothes and nervous demeanor. He kept glancing around, probably looking for escape routes in case I decided to confront him. But I wasn't interested in confrontation anymore. I was interested in revelation. I made my way to the main stage where the festival organizers were preparing for the evening's entertainment. The microphone was set up, the sound system was active, and hundreds of people were gathered within earshot. It was perfect. I waited until there was a lull in the program, then walked up to the microphone before anyone could stop me. The crowd turned to look, curious about who was interrupting the scheduled events. Good evening, everyone, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the park. For those who don't know me, I'm Jake Mallory. I own the auto repair shop on Elm Street, and I've lived in this community for over 20 years. I could see Stella pushing through the crowd, her face pale with panic. She knew what was coming, knew she couldn't stop it, knew that everything she'd worked for was about to crumble. I wanted to take this opportunity to share some news with all of you, I continued. Some of you may have heard rumors about problems in my marriage, about my wife, Stella, having an affair with her business partner, Evan Bishop. I want you to know that those rumors are absolutely true. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. This was better than any entertainment they'd been expecting, a real-life drama playing out in front of them. For the past 6 months, while my mother was dying in the hospital, my wife has been meeting her lover in cheap motels around town. My own daughter has been helping to cover it up, providing alibis and keeping me in the dark about what was happening in my own family. I could see Jessica in the crowd, her face red with shame and anger, her friends recording everything on their phones. The viral humiliation she'd been so eager to dish out was about to come back to her tenfold. But that's not the most interesting part, I said, pulling out my phone. The most interesting part is what they really think about me, about this community, about all of you. Should I share some of their private conversations? Should I let you hear what they say about the people of Edgewater when they think no one is listening? Jake, stop! Stella had finally reached the front of the crowd, her voice shrill with desperation. Please, don't do this! Don't do what? Tell the truth? Share the facts? Let people see who you really are? I looked out at the crowd, at all the faces staring up at me with rapt attention. My wife thinks you're all beneath her. She thinks this town is a dead end, that she deserves better than the life she has here. She's been planning to take half of everything I own and move somewhere more worthy of her talents. The crowd was getting restless now, angry murmurs rippling through the gathering. These were people who took pride in their community, who didn't appreciate being looked down on by someone they'd welcomed into their midst. And her lover, Evan Bishop, thinks even less of you. He's been laughing about how easy it is to fool the locals, how simple we all are, how he can take whatever he wants without consequences. I spotted Evan trying to sneak away through the crowd, but several people blocked his path, their faces hard with anger. But I saved the best for last, I said, raising my voice as the crowd noise grew louder, because it turns out this whole affair was orchestrated by someone else entirely, someone who's been manipulating my wife, using her to get revenge on me for something that happened years ago. The crowd went quiet again, sensing that the story was about to take another turn. Marla Henderson, my wife's best friend and confidant, has been pulling the strings from the beginning. She's the one who introduced Stella to Evan, who encouraged the affair, who provided the alibis and the opportunities. And why? Because I fired her from my shop 3 years ago for stealing from the cash register. I could see Marla in the crowd, her face white with shock. She'd thought she was so clever, so subtle in her manipulation. She'd never expected to be exposed, never imagined that I'd figure out her game. So there you have it, I concluded. The truth about my marriage, my family, and the people who thought they could use and discard me without consequences. I hope you've all enjoyed the show. I stepped away from the microphone, leaving chaos in my wake. The crowd was buzzing with excitement. Phones were recording everything, and social media was already lighting up with the scandal. Stella was crying, her carefully constructed image in ruins. Jessica was screaming at her friends to stop recording, but it was too late. The videos were already uploading, already going viral. Evan was trying to push through the crowd toward the parking lot, but people kept stopping him, demanding explanations, asking pointed questions about his intentions toward their community. And Marla was standing frozen in place, watching her own life implode as people turned to stare at her, connecting the dots, understanding her role in the whole sordid mess. But I wasn't done yet. I followed Evan toward the parking lot, catching up with him just as he reached his rental car. He was fumbling with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get them in the lock. Leaving so soon? I asked. The party's just getting started. He spun around, his face shiny with sweat. Stay away from me, Jake. I mean it. Or what? You'll call the police? Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to hear your side of the story. You're crazy. You're completely insane. Maybe I am. But I'm also right. About you, about Stella, about everything. I stepped closer, backing him against his car. You thought you could waltz into my town, steal my wife, destroy my family, and just walk away without consequences? You thought I was too weak, too stupid, too pathetic to fight back. I never... You were wrong. I reached out and plucked the car keys from his trembling fingers, then threw them as hard as I could toward the lake. They disappeared into the water with a small splash. You wanted excitement? You wanted drama? Congratulations. Now you get to walk home. I left him standing there in the parking lot, keyless and humiliated, while I walked back toward the festival. The crowd was still buzzing with excitement, still processing everything they'd heard, still recording and sharing and spreading the story far beyond the borders of our little town. By morning, everyone would know. By the end of the week, it would be old news, replaced by some other scandal, some other drama. But the damage would be permanent. Stella's reputation was destroyed. Her career was over. Her marriage was finished. Jessica would have to live with the shame of her betrayal for the rest of her life. Evan would never be able to show his face in Edgewater again. And Marla would spend years trying to rebuild the life she'd thrown away for the sake of petty revenge. As for me, I was finally free. Free from the lies. Free from the pretense. Free from the prison of being the reliable, predictable husband who didn't ask questions. I'd asked the questions. I'd gotten the answers, and I'd made sure everyone else got them too. Standing there in the middle of the festival, surrounded by the ruins of my old life, I started to laugh. Not the bitter, angry laugh of a broken man, but the genuine amusement of someone who'd finally gotten the joke. The joke was on them. All of them. They'd underestimated the nobody, dismissed the grease monkey, ignored the man who wasn't worth their consideration. And now, they'd never make that mistake again.